All right, so get this. Zen Buddhism. But we're not just dipping our toes in the shallow end here.
No, we're diving deep.
We're talking Soto and Rinzai, two schools that are like, well, imagine night and day, but both aiming for that Zen enlightenment.
Two sides of the same coin, maybe.
You sent over some seriously fascinating articles, by the way, prepping for this deep dive. Total brain workout. In a good way, of course.
It's a fascinating duality, isn't it? Within Buddhism, a practice all about finding a path to enlightenment, these two schools emerge with totally different maps to get there. Like, imagine reaching the same mountain peak, but taking completely different routes.
Okay, so we're talking more than just, like, different robes or chanting
Oh,
styles.
much more. This is about fundamentally different approaches to understanding the mind, to how we reach that elusive enlightenment.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, rewind a bit.
Mm.
Zen Buddhism didn't just magically appear in Japan, right?
You're right. A little history lesson is in order. Zen Buddhism, as we know it in Japan, actually started its journey in China as Chan Buddhism. Eventually, it crossed over to Japan, where it blossomed into these distinct schools we're diving into. Soto and Rinzai.
And that's where we meet those Zen rock stars, right?
Exactly.
Dogen and Eizai, bringing Soto and Rinzai Zen, respectively, to Japan.
Yeah.
I've always found it fascinating that they were both kind of underwhelmed by the Buddhism they initially found in Japan.
They were true seekers, wouldn't you say? Deeply, deeply committed to a more authentic, a more direct experience of enlightenment. Both independently journeyed to China, immersed themselves in those Chan Buddhist teachings, and came back to Japan with these fresh perspectives.
Okay, so picture them stepping off the boat, totally Zen, probably jet-lagged, but ready to shake things up in the world of Japanese Buddhism. But before we get into their teachings, elephant in the room, right? What exactly is enlightenment?
The million-dollar question. And this is where Soto and Rinzai really diverge. Both aim for enlightenment, but their definitions, the paths to get there, worlds apart.
All right, let's unpack this. Soto Zen, Dogen school, they see enlightenment as this gradual unfolding, right? Not some big dramatic aha moment.
More like a subtle shift that becomes part of everyday life. Instead of chop wood, carry water, just being chores, Soto Zen asks, what if those everyday tasks were infused with a deeper awareness? That's a glimpse into their approach.
Wait, so those moments when I'm like completely absorbed in gardening, where time just disappears, that's a taste of enlightenment, according to Soto Zen.
You got it. It's about finding enlightenment within those ordinary moments, and that's where shikantaza, or just sitting meditation, comes in.
No fancy visuals, no mantras, just pure presence.
Exactly.
Okay, so no trying to empty my mind, which, let's be real, seems impossible.
It's more about observing thoughts without judgments, maybe watching clouds drift by, that kind of thing.
Okay, I can almost picture that.
Through this practice of mindfulness, Soto Zen teaches that enlightenment emerges naturally. Not like a destination you arrive at, more like an ongoing journey.
That's actually kind of comforting when you think about it. It's not about reaching some perfect state of enlightenment, but about cultivating awareness in each and every moment. Now, Rinzai Zen, Eizai school, totally different vibe, right? If Soto is the gradual unfolding, Rinzai is like the express lane to enlightenment.
It can definitely feel that way. Rinzai emphasizes sudden enlightenment, often described as kensho or satori, these bursts of insight that, bam, shatter illusions and reveal your true nature. Think a lightning bolt of understanding.
Okay, that's definitely way more dramatic than chopping wood mindfully. How do they even try to achieve that kind of sudden awakening?
This is where Rinzai Zen gets really interesting and maybe a little infamous. They use koans.
Koans? Is that like a meditation cushion upgrade or something?
Not quite. Imagine paradoxical riddles or questions designed to, for lack of a better term, break your brain open, but in a good way, of course.
Okay, intrigued, but maybe a tiny bit terrified. Give me an example.
All right, classic. What is the sound of one hand clapping?
Wait, what? You can't clap with one hand? That's just nonsense.
And that's the point. Koans, they short-circuit our logical minds, the ones that cling to reason, to analysis. They make us think outside the box, confront those limitations of how we typically see the world.
So it's like those koans, they throw a wrench in our thought machinery, force us to find a new way to operate.
That's a great way to put it. Through grappling with these seemingly nonsensical riddles, Rinzai Zen practitioners aim to exhaust those logical minds. And in doing so, create the space for sudden, intuitive insights to arise.
Wow, okay, I'm starting to see how these two schools, both aiming for enlightenment, take such different paths. One's like this gentle stream carving its way slowly. The other, a raging river breaking through everything in its path. Which brings us to the meditation face-off. Soto Zen's shikantaza versus Rinzai Zen's koan praxis. We've touched on them, but let's dive a little deeper, shall we?
Absolutely. Let's explore the details, how they reflect each school's core philosophy.
Perfect. So first up, shikantaza, the cornerstone of Soto Zen. We talked about just sitting, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Picture this. You're sitting, spine straight, but not stiff, not forcing your mind blank, no visualizing, no chanting. You're simply present in the moment, aware of your breath, your body, the sounds around you.
So it's about cultivating a state of pure awareness, not getting lost in that constant stream of thoughts that usually, let's be honest, fill our mind.
Exactly. It's about developing this detached observation of your thoughts, your emotions. They rise, they fall. You're just witnessing it all without judgment, without getting attached.
It sounds almost too simple. Like, is that really it? Just sit and be aware.
But that just is where the real work lies, you see. Our minds, they excel at distraction, pulling us away from the present moment with worries about the past, anxieties about the future, just endless chatter. Shikantaza is about training your mind to settle, to anchor itself in the here and now.
It's like building a muscle, this ability to simply be present without getting swept away by thoughts.
What a great analogy. It takes discipline, patience, consistent practice. And like any muscle you train, the ability to be present, it gets stronger over time.
And this is what Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen, believed was the path to enlightenment. Not some distant goal, but something accessible in every moment, through simply being present.
Precisely. Dogen taught that enlightenment isn't something we achieve, but something we realize we already have. It's about removing the obstacles, all those layers of conditioning that cloud our true nature, prevent us from seeing clearly.
Wow, okay, starting to get the depth of shikantaza. It's not just about sitting still, it's about cultivating this profound awareness that impacts, well, every part of our lives. Now, on the flip side, there's koan in practice, the heart of Rinzai Zen. We already touched upon a classic koan, but can you walk us through what this practice actually involves?
Of course. In Rinzai Zen, the teacher, or master, plays a much more active role in guiding the student. They present them with a koan, often during a private interview called dokusan.
Just to remind everyone, a koan is like a riddle, but with the purpose of basically stumping you.
Exactly. Koans are designed to be impossible to solve with pure logic. They're these unsolvable puzzles, forcing you to confront the limitations of how you usually think.
So what happens during this dokusan? Does the student just sit there racking their brains trying to answer these possible questions?
Essentially, yes. The student grapples with the koan, meditating on it, turning it over and over in their mind, trying to find some solution. But the real key isn't finding an intellectual answer. It's about experiencing a shift in perspective, a sudden awakening that transcends logic.
So it's not about the right answer, but about using the koan to break through those mental barriers that, keep us from seeing clearly.
Precisely. The koan is a tool used by the master to chip away at the student's preconceived notions, their habitual ways of thinking, until, bam, they break through to a deeper understanding.
And that breakthrough is what Rinzai Zen calls kensho, or satori.
Yes, it's a flash of insight, a sudden awakening to one's true nature, often accompanied by, joy, liberation, deep peace.
That sounds honestly incredible, but I'm guessing getting to that point is no walk in the park.
You're right. Koan practice isn't for the faint of heart. It's intense, it's demanding, and it can be incredibly frustrating. Rinzai masters are known for, shall we say, unconventional teaching methods.
Oh yeah, we've heard the stories.
Sometimes using shouts, slaps, even physical blows to shake students out of their habitual thought patterns.
Wow, talk about tough love taken to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Sounds like Rinzai Zen requires a lot of trust in your teacher, a willingness to be pushed to your absolute limit.
It does. But this intensity, this willingness to challenge every assumption, it's all in service of helping the student break free from those illusions that bind them and realize their full potential.
Fascinating. So we've got Soto Zen's shikantaza, cultivating stillness and awareness through just sitting, and Rinzai Zen's koan practice, using those paradoxical riddles to shatter illusions and awaken us to our true nature.
Hey.
Both paths lead to the same destination, enlightenment, but the journeys are, well, like night and day. Now, I'm curious about the teacher-student dynamic in all this. It sounds pretty central to both, but in different ways.
You're spot on. The teacher-student relationship is essential in both Soto and Rinzai Zen, but how that guidance is offered, how it's received, very different. Think of it like two distinct dance styles, both beautiful, both intricate, but with totally different rhythms and movements.
I love that analogy. So let's start with Soto Zen. You mentioned earlier that Soto Zen teachers take a more passive role. What does that mean exactly?
In Soto Zen, the emphasis is on self-discovery through consistent practice. The teacher acts as a guide, offering support, clarification, but ultimately allowing the student to find their own way.
So it's less about the teacher imparting knowledge and more about them creating a space for the student to realize their own inner wisdom.
Exactly. The Soto Zen teacher acts as a mirror, reflecting back to the student their true nature, their potential for awakening. They might offer Dharma talks, provide instruction on posture, answer questions, but they won't force-feed insights or use confrontational methods to provoke awakening.
It sounds like a gentle, almost hands-off approach. But I imagine that doesn't mean the teacher isn't important.
Absolutely not. The teacher's role in Soto Zen is still crucial. They provide a framework for practice, and their own embodiment of the teachings, it serves as a living example for the student.
So it's more about embodying the teachings and holding space for the student to do the same rather than actively pushing them toward enlightenment.
Precisely. It's about fostering an environment of quiet support where the student feels safe to explore their inner landscape and gradually awaken to their true nature.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have the Rinzai Zen approach, which, from what we've discussed, sounds a lot more, well, let's just say dynamic.
Dynamic is certainly one way to put it. In Rinzai Zen, the teacher takes a much more direct and, yes, sometimes confrontational approach. Remember those koans? Well, the teacher is the one wielding them, using them as a skillful means to break through the student's intellectual barriers, to awaken them to their true nature.
So if the Soto Zen teacher is like a gentle guide, the Rinzai Zen teacher is more like a drill sergeant for the mind.
That's a great comparison. In Rinzai Zen, the training is rigorous, it's demanding. The teacher doesn't shy away from challenging the student's assumptions, using every tool at their disposal to help them break free from their limited perspectives.
And this includes those, well, unconventional teaching methods you mentioned earlier, like the shouting, or even physical blows. I have to admit, that's still a bit hard for me to wrap my head around.
It can be. But it's important to understand that these methods, while they might seem harsh, are never done from a place of anger or malice. They're expressions of the teacher's compassion, their unwavering commitment to helping the student awaken.
So it's like tough love, but taken to like a whole other level. They're essentially saying, I see your potential, even if you don't, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to help you realize it.
Exactly. In Rinzai Zen, the relationship between teacher and student is considered sacred. It's a bond of deep trust, mutual respect, forged in the fire of intense practice.
Fascinating. So we have these two very different approaches to the teacher-student relationship, reflecting the core philosophies of each school. Soto Zen emphasizes self-discovery through gentle guidance, while Rinzai Zen embraces a more direct and challenging approach, using koans and, well, let's call them unconventional methods to awaken the student's true potential. Now, I'm curious, once someone has, achieved enlightenment, or at least made significant progress on that path, how does that translate to their everyday life? Is there a difference in how Soto and Rinzai Zen approach this?
That's a very insightful question. And yes, while both schools aim for this integration of Zen principles into daily life, their approach to this integration differs in subtle yet significant ways.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's start with Soto Zen. If enlightenment is seen as this gradual unfolding, woven into the fabric of everyday experience, does that mean life after enlightenment, or perhaps during enlightenment? Looks pretty much the same.
In a way, yes. Remember that phrase, chop wood, carry water? That, in a nutshell, encapsulates the Soto Zen perspective on enlightenment and daily life. It's not about reaching some elevated state where you're constantly blissful and detached from the world.
So it's not about escaping from the mundane, but about finding enlightenment within it.
Exactly. Soto Zen teaches that enlightenment isn't separate from our everyday experiences. It's about bringing presence, awareness to everything we do, you see. Whether we're washing dishes, having a conversation, or, stuck in traffic, the opportunity for practice, for awakening, is always there.
So it's about finding the extraordinary within the ordinary, the sacred within the mundane.
Beautifully put. Soto Zen emphasizes this seamless integration of practice into daily life. It's about bringing that same quality of awareness we cultivate during Zazen to all of our activities, no matter how small or insignificant they might seem.
That makes a lot of sense. So in Soto Zen, there's no real distinction between an enlightened life and a regular life. It's all just life, but lived with a deeper level of awareness of presence.
Precisely.
Got it. Now, how does Rinzai Zen view this idea of life after or during enlightenment? If enlightenment is this sudden breakthrough, this flash of insight, How does that translate into daily experience?
Rinzai Zen often views daily life as the proving ground for those insights gained through koan practice. It's where those flashes of satori are put to the test, integrated into the, well, often messy reality of being human.
So it's like taking those profound insights from your meditation cushion and seeing how they hold up in the real world.
Exactly. Rinzai Zen emphasizes embodying those insights, living them out in your relationships, your work, your interactions, everything. It's about, walking the walk, so to speak.
So it's not enough to just have these moments of awakening. You have to actually embody them, let them transform the way you interact with the world.
Exactly. Rinzai Zen emphasizes that true enlightenment isn't passive. It's about actively engaging with life. It's about bringing that clarity, that compassion you've cultivated through practice into the challenges, the opportunities of daily life.
So in a way, Rinzai Zen sees everyday life as an extension of your Zen practice.
Exactly. It's not about separating our Zen life from our regular life, but about integrating the two, bringing that same level of awareness of intention to everything you do.
This is fascinating. So we have Soto Zen, finding enlightenment in the everyday, that seamless integration of practice into all aspects of life. And then Rinzai Zen, using daily life as a test ground, a way to integrate those hard-won insights.
Two distinct approaches, yet both ultimately leading to the same goal. Living a life that reflects your deepest wisdom, your deepest compassion.
Now, before we move on, I have to ask about the vibe. We've talked about philosophy, meditation, even the teacher-student dynamic, but what about the overall feel of these two schools?
Yeah.
If we were to walk into a Soto Zen temple versus a Rinzai Zen temple, what kind of energy would we encounter?
I'm so glad you asked. The differences between Soto and Rinzai Zen, they even extend to the look and feel of their temples, their practice spaces.
All right, set the scene for me. Let's say we're walking into a Soto Zen temple. What do we see? What do we feel?
Imagine this. You step through the temple gates, and this wave of tranquility just washes over you. The gardens are meticulously raked, demonstrating this mindfulness, this attention to detail. The architecture is simple, elegant with clean lines, a minimalist aesthetic.
Sounds incredibly serene. What about the atmosphere inside?
Inside, you'll find quietude, a stillness that permeates everything. Monks and practitioners sit in zazen, postures erect but relaxed, faces serene. The chanting, when it happens, is slow, rhythmic, like a soothing balm for the soul.
Sounds like a sanctuary, you
Yeah.
know, an oasis of calm in the middle of all the chaos.
What a beautiful way to put it. Soto Zen temples, they're designed for introspection, to create a space where practitioners can connect with their own inner stillness.
I can already feel myself relaxing just thinking about it. Okay, now let's transport ourselves to a Rinzai Zen temple. What's the vibe like there?
Be prepared for a totally different energy. Rinzai Zen temples tend to be more dynamic, more visually stimulating. The architecture might be more ornate, with intricate carvings, vibrant colors. You're more likely to find striking calligraphy, bold brushstrokes that seem to vibrate with energy.
Okay, so we're not talking minimalist serenity anymore. What about the atmosphere inside?
Inside, you might feel a tangible buzz, this intensity. The chanting, if it occurs, will be more forceful, more rhythmic, designed to awaken your spirit. You might even hear the sharp crack of a kaisaku.
A what?
A kaisaku. It's a flat wooden stick used by the master to, shall we say, rouse a drowsy practitioner.
Whoa, okay, that definitely paints a vivid picture.
Oh,
So if Soto Zen temples are about quiet contemplation, Rinzai Zen temples are about sparking that inner fire, that jolt of awakening.
exactly. Both offer unique paths to enlightenment, and this is reflected in every aspect of their practice, from their philosophy and meditation techniques to the very atmosphere of their temples.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much, from the historical roots of Zen Buddhism in Japan to the nuances of Soto and Rinzai Zen, their meditation practices, those distinct teacher-student relationships, and even the contrasting vibes of their temples.
And we've only just scratched the surface. Zen Buddhism is a rich and multifaceted tradition with so much more to explore.
Which is why I'm so glad you're here to guide us. Before we get carried away, let's take a quick pause to process everything we've covered about Soto and Rinzai Zen. Don't worry, we'll be back soon to dive even deeper into this fascinating world.
And we're back, still diving deep, deep, deep into Soto and Rinzai Zen.
Still with us.
Oh, absolutely. Although, full disclosure, my mind is still kind of buzzing from all those koans. I
Yeah.
like those mental puzzles, the ones you can't help but keep trying to solve, even though you know.
Even though you know you might not find a straightforward answer. Exactly.
That's the beauty of them. They linger, those koans. They challenge us to keep questioning, keep digging deeper, look beyond our usual assumptions.
Totally. You can't just shake them off, even if you try. But Before we get lost in a koan spiral, we were talking about Soto and Rinzai Zen as two different paths up the same mountain. I love that analogy, by the way.
It's a useful one, isn't it?
So, Soto Zen, that's like the winding path, the gradual climb.
Mm-hmm.
Rinzai Zen, we're talking scaling that cliff face, pushing your limits to reach the top. It really paints a picture of how these two schools, both aiming for enlightenment, can have such radically different approaches.
And the key takeaway is there's no one right path, no single way to reach that peak. It's about finding the approach that resonates with you, your individual strength, and yes, even your challenges.
What would you say to someone who's listened to all this, feels drawn to Zen, but is maybe a little overwhelmed by this whole Soto versus Rinzai thing?
I'd say trust your gut. Explore both traditions, read about them, learn as much as you can, but ultimately, listen to your intuition. What excites you? What makes you a little bit nervous, but in a good way? Those are usually good signs that you're onto something.
I love that. Don't overthink it. Just dive in and see where the current takes you.
Exactly. And always remember, Zen Buddhism, it's not about blindly following rules or dogma. It's about awakening to your own inner wisdom, your own unique path to enlightenment.
Beautifully said. Okay, so we started with this whole history of Zen Buddhism in Japan, dove into the differences between Soto and Rinzai, explored those meditation practices, those were big, and even took a virtual tour of their temples. Totally different vibes.
And through it all, we've really touched on the very essence of Zen Buddhism, the pursuit of enlightenment, realizing your true nature, and then the real work, bringing those insights to life.
It's been a whirlwind. But before we wrap up, what's the one thing you really hope our listeners take away from this whole Soto and Rinzai Zen deep dive?
If there's one thing, it's this. The path to enlightenment, it isn't one size fits all.
It's about finding that approach that just works for you, your rhythm, your way of being.
Exactly. Whether it's the quiet contemplation of Soto Zen or that dynamic intensity of Rinzai Zen that speaks to you, the important thing is to approach the practice with an open mind, a willingness to learn, and a deep compassion for yourself and for others.
Those are powerful words to reflect on. We'll be back soon with one last thought-provoking question to inspire even further exploration of this fascinating world. And we're back one last time for this deep dive into Soto and Rinzai Zen. It's been, wow, quite the journey.
It has, hasn't it? We've covered so much ground.
My mind's still kind of doing that mental gymnastics routine, courtesy of those koans.
They tend to have that effect.
Before we let our listeners go and try to tackle those koans themselves, I wanted to circle back to that mountain metaphor one last time. Remember, Soto Zen, the winding path, gradual climb. Rinzai Zen, that's more like scaling the cliff face, pushing yourself to the limit to reach the summit.
Such a powerful image for highlighting those different approaches to enlightenment.
So for someone listening, feeling that pull toward Zen Buddhism, but maybe feeling a little stuck on which path to even step on first,
Right, that classic dilemma.
what would you say to them?
I tell them to think about it like this. If Soto and Rinzai are two different paths up the same mountain, what does your ideal path look like? What calls to you?
What a great question to leave our listeners with.
The beauty of this journey, it's yours to create, one mindful step at a time.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll let you go contemplate that very question. Until next time, keep diving deep and exploring the endlessly fascinating world around you.